Simone de Beauvoir is one of the great existentialist philosophers of the 20th century. Existentialism is basically the idea that because we're free, it's up to us to make our own lives meaningful. And for that reason, existentialism is also a critical philosophy. It challenges anything that claims the meaning of our lives is already given from some outside source, whether that's nature, God, or anything. Anyway, so we're going to look at Simone de Beauvoir's great book, The Second Sex, in which she studies the contemporary situation of women. Well, what is a woman? I mean, you might think that to be a woman is to be that member of the human species that produces eggs in the context of biological reproduction. That's not wrong, but it falls quite short of what woman really means in our society. So people can say about someone, she's not a real woman, analogously to the way they might say about a man, he's not a real man. Right? We sometimes use that expression to make it sound like there's a certain way you're supposed to be if you're a man or a woman. And any particular person might not be living up to that. So as she says on page 3, everyone agrees there are females in the human species. Today, as in the past, they make up about half of humanity. And yet, we are told, in the context of feminism, or what used to be called women's liberation, we are told that femininity is in jeopardy. And we are urged, well, be women, stay women, become women. But, if you think about things that way, she says, so not every female human being is necessarily a woman. She must take part in this mysterious and endangered reality known as femininity. And so we have this sense that there's, a feminine way of existing, a feminine way of being. And that's part of what it means to be a woman. And so that's what she's going to investigate, and she's going to be critical of it. You yourself, as a contemporary person and in the name of feminism, might very well say, I think everybody's equal. We're all just human beings. There shouldn't be any such idea. And that again, no doubt that's a good idea as far as it goes. But her point is that way of thinking kind of evades the issue, because as she says on page 4, the truth is that anyone can clearly see that humanity is split into two categories of individuals with manifestly different clothes, faces, bodies, smiles, movements, interests, and occupations. These differences are perhaps superficial. Perhaps they're destined to disappear. But what is certain is that for the moment, they exist in a strikingly obvious way. Now, she wrote this book in 1949, but I don't think she would say anything different in 2022. That while it might be true that we're all intrinsically equal, we're not actually equal. That there are two very different worlds, the world of women and the world of men. And the situations of the people living out of those identities are very different. So what it is to be a woman, in that sense, is quite different from what it is to be a man. But that reality of being a woman is not biological. It's not a matter of being biologically female, right? As she says on page 283 at the beginning of the second part of the book, she says, one is not born, but rather becomes woman. No biological, psychic, or economic destiny defines the figure that the human female takes on in society. So the meaning woman, or the meaning of the feminine, is a social role that's put upon women, a very real one and a very weighty one. And that's now what she's going to investigate. So, no doubt it's right to say we're all human beings, and that notion of humanity, doesn't really distinguish between man and woman. Well, while that may be conceptually true, that the notion human being is neutral, de Beauvoir's point is that in our living practice, we don't use that term in a neutral way. Rather, the way we have understood what it is to be a human being has basically always been on the model of the man. But what that means is that men grow up just thinking of themselves straightforwardly as human beings without difficulty. And as she says on page 5, a man grasps his body as a direct and normal link with the world that he believes he apprehends in all objectivity. So there's a way that the man's perspective is that, yeah, I'm just a person. I just go out and do things. My body doesn't matter. It just automatically puts me in the world and lets me grasp things the way they are. But then, on the basis of that model, women are understood to have like oddly different bodies. And women are not really brought up to think of themselves as people who are just fully empowered to act as free and independent agents. But on the contrary, women are typically brought up to believe that they have to depend on men to allow them into the world, to make way for them in the world. Indeed, Freud, when he's talking about the phallic stage and talking about how, as young children, boys and girls are growing up learning how to identify themselves sexually in the context of comparing themselves with their parents and so on. He says girls can, in that case, experience their bodies as missing that thing the boys have, the penis, right? And they can experience their body as being defined by something they don't have, right? Defining their body in a negative way because they're not men, right? That's something Freud talks about under the heading of the Castration Complex. And so, at that very intimate level of how the female child is growing up to inhabit her female body in the context of defining herself sexually, she can very easily develop this sense that she's the inferior sex that's sort of lacking the proper male body. So women are brought up in a world where their bodies are kind of marked out as something that differentiates them from the normal, from the neutral. And that difference really puts women in a kind of a subordinate position where they're defined in a kind of role they have for men. The role of being attractive and also, the role of being wife or mother and so on, right? They're defined in terms of the role they can play for a man of allowing him to do the things he wants to do. And so de Beauvoir says, in the context of our cultural understanding of what it is to be a human being, right? The man is kind of the neutral model, human being. But for the woman, she says, she is the other. And what she means by when she says she is the other is that, in the way I was just saying, the woman plays a role in the man's story. And in that sense, the woman can't really be defined without man. But on the other hand, though the man makes use of her and so on, man is just defined neutrally as a human being, unproblematically. And so the man doesn't define himself in terms of the woman. So again, she's saying these are the meanings our culture builds up in us and that we inherit whether we like it or not. So as she says, on page 14, the vast majority of men do not explicitly make this position their own. It's not like if you ask average, reasonable man around, do you think women should be understood this way? No, people would disavow that view. As she says, they do not posit women as inferior. They're too imbued with the democratic ideal not to recognize all human beings as equals. But in the very way we carry out our lives, we in fact nonetheless perpetuate those ideas and those expectations. So on 758 and 759, she describes a sort of a scenario. Women, for the reasons I was just giving, are commonly brought up to think, at some level, they need to get a man and get a family and thereby get a successful life. And the life women will often have will be more the one who's responsible for domestic things. So she says, imagine what it's like when those people spend time together. She says, during the evening that the lover spends with his mistress, he might be doing something useful for his career, or seeing friends, cultivating relations, entertaining themselves. Because for the man, normally integrated into the society, time is a positive asset, right? He's got things to do, and so he can use his time as an agent to improve his life. But in contrast, the wife at home, or in some cases the girlfriend, is often doesn't have things to do. So she says, by contrast, for the idle and bored woman, time is a burden she wants to get rid of. So for her, the man's presence is pure profit. In many cases, what interests man the most in a relationship is the sexual gain he draws from it. And he can, at worst, settle for spending just enough time with his mistress to perform the sex act. Right? He wants to get a thing from her. But what she wants is to dispose of the excess time she has on her hands and, spend time with him. So, not everybody plays out that situation, of course. But her point is that is reflective of a really basic way that the lines are drawn between what the life of women is going to be like and what the life of men is going to be like. On 757, just again talking about how what it is to be a woman has been projected on society, she says this situation really treats the woman as a slave while persuading her she is a queen. Right? And so that notion of a queen, that's kind of the model she's saying of what how women are supposed to think of themselves. But if you try to live out that role of the queen, it turns out you're a slave. So as she says, we have seen the poetic veils used to hide the monotonous burdens she bears, housework and maternity. So in exchange for her freedom, right, she kind of gave up her freedom to be a domestic worker. She was given fallacious treasures of femininity, right? So, the femininity is the thing that lets you be the beautiful queen who's the distraction, the woman who, doesn't really develop her body as a way for getting things done in the world, but instead focuses on making it beautiful. That's the thing that lets you be feminine. But the prize of that is that you get to have a life devoted to domestic labor. So again, going back to that point about woman as other, woman is being slotted into a kind of functional role for the man. And as she says on 765, for the man caught between the silence of nature, this sort of challenging thing you have to deal with, and the demanding presence of other freedoms, right? Like, if you think you just have to go out and be that person working in the world, like other people and nature both present real challenges. Other people are, they might not accept you, and nature is hard to work on. He says, for a person faced with that, a being who is both his peer and a passive thing appears as a great treasure, right? What you can get if you have, a wife, and the role she's talking about here is someone who softens the demands of nature by doing a bunch of work for you, and softens the challenges of social acceptance because, there you have a person who responds to you, lovingly and interactingly and so on. So you get this thing that gets in between you and the two demanding things. And what could be better than to have a kind of thing that's nice to you, a kind of captive thing, right? Basically a slave, as she says. And she says that is the role that women are invited to have. She says, she does not stand in front of a man as a subject, but as an object paradoxically endowed with subjectivity, right? Generally speaking, the attitude of men towards women is that they're nice objects that happen also to be, people you can talk with and so on. But the depths of women's subjectivity is typically not the thing that men imagine when they think of women. They think of them as objects, their bodies as objects. So she's saying that is the basic and oppressive model that defines the masculine and the feminine, right? And she's saying men and women grow up into thinking those are roles they have to live out, roles they have to perform, right? And that issue of growing up into it is pretty important, right? Society puts upon women the expectation that they should behave a certain way, and confronts women with specific possibilities. And so women, in fact, grow up to be the kind of person that role imagines, right? So she says, society basically trains women to adopt the role of being the inferior member. Right? So, Aristotle said back in Book 2, Chapter 1 of the Nicomachean Ethics, right, that, you sort of become a certain kind of person by practicing it. And society, from very early on, encourages women to practice those things that are going to make them become that person that men expect. And similarly, men are going to be brought up from very early on to become that kind of person, the masculine, the man. Right? So her point is basically, our society encourages us to grow up into ways of interpreting ourselves as men and women that involves what is essentially a kind of hostile or combative relationship between men and women, in that there's a real hierarchy there. And the relationship between them is one that puts men on top. And here's what she says then the real issue is. This is ultimately then the situation for women. She says on page 17, woman's drama lies in this conflict between the fundamental claim of every subject, which always posits itself as essential, and the demands of a situation that constitutes her as inessential. Right? This is the real situation of women, that women are free beings. That means you as a woman are a person who experiences yourself as a subject and says, hey, I matter. But the situation of women is that, being such a person, you grow up in a world that says, actually, you don't matter so much. Actually, you're inessential. And so woman's drama is how to deal with the sense that you're someone in a world that says, yeah, you're not really someone. How to deal with the sense that you matter as much as anybody else with a world that says, well, no, you don't quite matter as much. Right? That's what she wants to change. So I just want to bring this back specifically to sex and thinking about how much these kinds of roles we're talking about are defined into our sexual lives. Right? So that, you might think that sex is just the domain of your own private desire. But what de Beauvoir is saying here is that in our sexual lives, we carry over these deep cultural values and expectations. And our sexuality is the arena in which we play out those issues, right? And so she says, for example, about the man, on 756, she says, man is consumed by the concern to appear male, important, superior. So he play acts so that others will play act with him. Right? He feels hostility for women because he's afraid of them. What time and energy he wastes in speaking about women seducing and fearing them, right? So, in the situation we've talked about, right, women are construed as beautiful prizes. But remember, she says it's the object imbued with subjectivity. Well, at one level, the man wants the woman to be a kind of a thing. But the fact is, women are subjects. So they're not just yours. If you're the man, right? And so there's a sort of threatening dimension to that your object may have a life of its own, and you may not really possess it. And equally, precisely because you direct your desire towards it, there's a way in which that object has a certain kind of control over you, right? So there's something sort of frightening about it. And for that reason, as a man, your sexual relationship to the woman as an object can be your attempt to prove you're a man by dominating it, right? Or, in the context of the woman, you may think, I can use my attractive beauty as a way to capture that guy, to get him, right? And so sex can be the domain where you're really playing out those roles. So sex can really be a domain of you know, of conflict, of fighting for domination. But as she says on 763, it doesn't have to be that way. She says, it's possible for people to operate in sex in a way in which the notions of victory and defeat have yielded to an idea of, exchange, equal interaction. And so I just want to read you a little bit of what she says about sex. She says, in fact, each of them, man and the woman, lives the strange ambiguity of existence made body in his or her own way, right? She's saying, the weird reality of the free human being is that we are bodies. And our bodies are strange. Our bodies are the plaything of hormones and the species, the uneasy prey to desire, right? Our bodies bring up all kinds of things for us that we don't invent. And we have to sort of figure out how we're going to deal with that. And that's as true for men as it is for women. It's as true for women as it is for men. And sex could be the domain where, together people are kind of investigating and navigating what that's like. But often, on the contrary, that domain has already been stamped with the meaning of working through this sort of conflict of the sexes. So, what she's trying to do is identify the reality of that as something that, significantly defines the meaning of what it is to be woman and what it is to be man in contemporary society. And so this, basic thing I've been trying to sketch out quickly here, that's what we're going to now go on to look at in a little bit more detail by looking at John Berger's book, Ways of Seeing, which really takes up this sort of existentialist interpretation of the human being in the context of thinking about what it is to be men and women in contemporary society.